Welcome to Deep Dive. I go by the name C, starting my first episode of my podcast. Really excited to get into the reasons of why we need to have deeper conversations. What we're going to be talking about in this episode is really just a breakdown of, what's happening in our conversations, but outside of our deep talks, what's important to us. And it's not just about feelings, it's about what our thoughts are. One of the main common factors that I found is a lot of people don't have a lot of purpose, and purpose not being that they can't find it or don't have actual purpose. It's more, we've talked about what are you doing this for? What are you after? What would you like to see from your life? So, that's where it made me think, oh, wow, a podcast that's focused on entrepreneurship, real estate, financial literacy, whatever the means of happiness may be or what it sounds like. Let's talk about those conversations and have a deeper conversation around how to mentally, physically, and spiritually handle those situations. I wanted to reflect on the moments that you can have shallow conversations that felt you leave feeling empty. We see a lot of shallow conversations on TV shows, whether it's TV shows or, movies. All those things are pretty much the same. Some of my friends and family, they brought up a point, in fact, that a lot of people don't have substance, so it's hard to decide and configure what would make you comfortable or what doesn't make you comfortable. So whenever I was thinking of deep dive, I was like, there's some time I looked around and realized everyone was talking, but no one was really listening. And when you're thinking about people who are talking versus who are listening, how can you really capture the audience? So that's the personal reason why, thinking of where I've had a lot of people share with me things that have helped me from entrepreneurship, from my career, from schooling, from learning, just growing personally, professionally. I think having a deeper conversation, bringing people on that know about different things, that are in different positions, collaboration, those are the reasons why I'm excited about the podcast and really excited to bring people in that can kind of share their insights around what a deeper conversation and deeper thoughts can mean. Deeper conversations just allow you to understand someone's purpose, as I mentioned, but also helps you understand, where your purpose is. And as you're listening to others, it helps identify some things that you may want to change or some things that you may want to eventually evolve. So that balance of, someone else's version of their best life won't be your version of your best life. The purpose of having these conversations is to really take a deep dive and find out what is your version of your rich life. And if you can find out your version of your rich life at any point in your life, and mind you, it's not at a certain age or time frame. Your rich life comes from when you decide what you want from life, and that's it. It's not really to when your mom or your dad or your friends or even society say it has to be this way. It's more of when you decide as an individual what derives deeper feelings, what derives deeper actions to get the things we want to see out of our life. Some of the things that we'll cover are going to be ambition, mental health, love, loss, just identity and how to identify yourself in the ever-changing world. The balance of what you want and don't want out of life is really the hard part of some of the topics we want to bring up, because we want to hear what you think. We also want to hear what other people think. And collaborating on experiences helps you grow individually, but it helps you take back using someone else's experience to your own advantage. So I think those are going to be really exciting things to talk about. And the discussions we're going to be talking about is, water cooler talk and having chats is easy, but having a conversation around, how is your day? What's important to you? Why are you doing what you're doing? Asking the how, what, why questions when you're really trying to get to know somebody are going to be the real ways in the deep dive podcast that we're going to describe how and what we can do to really support someone in helping them get to where they want to go. So moving into the next conversation, I like to always talk about why conversations stay like surface level, and the breakdown usually is people fear, trauma, media culture. I think there's a thing now where people are like, I don't want to be canceled. And it's like, if you're worried about what you're being canceled, you got to think about what you're going to be saying before you have to worry about being canceled. Meaning that, everything that you're seeing in society doesn't always necessarily have everything to do with how you have to handle yourself individually. So, the pressures of not only sometimes interfere with our thoughts and our feelings. The best way to sometimes mitigate that is to go in and actually calm yourself. How we handle the things from our surface level conversations to our mid level to our full, hard conversations, using our emotional intelligence is really the key to a successful deep conversation and an insightful one to get to know someone. And I think that's really what's missing nowadays in relationships. People aren't taking time to get to know one another. And it's not that they don't have the time, it's because people have lost interest. And I think once people find interest and then it doesn't maintain the interest, I think that's where we as just humans naturally sometimes lose relationships or don't maintain them because they didn't have the interest that were going to help us sometimes get what we want or get us where we wanted to go. So that balance of finding what you want and getting out of just having surface level conversations really comes with that intent and that genuine side to get to know somebody, and that's why deeper conversations are so powerful. It allows people on the outside, whether it's your family or friends and other people, to really lean in on what you're doing and how you're delivering your message, to say, wow, I'm not only self-aware, but I know that I can be a better version of myself if I try. But, we all come from different homes and different walks of life. So to compare yourself ever to someone else, you should never do that. That's going to be not only, the demise to your downfall, but that doesn't help you get further to your version of your rich life. And your rich life really comes from discovering what you want out of life. And what I want out of life isn't going to be the same thing you want out of life. I want what's best for everybody who wants what's best for themselves, but I actionably can't go and make those things happen for them. Even if I gave someone everything they wanted, they might go and lose it all and ask for it again, but it'd be like, well, I can't give it to you again because you had everything you wanted, so that balance of really knowing and being self-aware, healing and building strong relationships come from really knowing yourself first. And I think, when I'm telling this story, I think of going back to being in my 20s and being in my teens and my mid-20s, a lot of relationships not only were changing and evolving, but I think of whenever I bought my first home, the relationship I created from 15 or 20 years ago is the reason I was able to purchase a home, right? It's the balance of, okay, hey, the relationship you had from a time frame when you were maybe younger, you never know how that's going to evolve and help you shape your future. And when you're thinking of shaping your future, that balance of having that relationship to move you forward in whatever direction it is for you and your family or for yourself is going to be super important to where and how you spend your time. So, whenever we're thinking of, opening up and reflecting on that moment, it helped me understand too, in 2021, the housing market was super crazy. I don't think I was going to have the opportunity to really be able to get a house just because, everybody was buying things for cash. And that balance of knowing that, hey, I'm just going to reach out to my network, see if anybody's selling a home or see if anybody knows anyone who's trying to sell a home. I think that balance really helped me recognize how relationships can truly work to your favor depending on how you treat people. So that brings it into that full circle of, having substance and having non-surface level conversations when you have the time is super important because it allows you to really mitigate not having to follow up on things that don't make the most sense. Whenever I'm thinking of questions that I've been asked of using that story, it's like, a lot of times we think the important part of our relationships rely only on what someone's doing for us or how they can help us. But the true sense of a relationship comes from how someone makes you feel. And that balance of knowing how someone makes you feel comes into, okay, hey, 15, 20 years ago, we don't know how we made certain people feel. Hopefully we didn't make anybody upset. You can't always control that as a part of doing business as a person in general. You're going to rub some people the wrong way. You're going to ruffle some feathers. But with that being said, you don't go through your whole life trying to do that only and solely. So this opportunity to buy my first home opened my eyes to not only have an understanding of how deep conversations and deep thought and having deeper relationships can truly progress or degress your life. When we think of degress in relationships, if there's people in your life that aren't moving forward and you want to move forward, that's not a bad thing that you should feel as an individual, And when we're thinking of the problems that sometimes we face, it boils down to who we're around. So if you're like, hey, I'm trying to move forward and I want to be around people who want to move forward, sometimes it starts with a career pivot. In some of these episodes, we're going to be talking about how to navigate career pivots, how to go and actually get more money from your career, from leaving one role to go to a next company. We're going to talk about, what does it look like to go from getting a 3% raise to getting a 25 to 30% raise. All those things are not only super important, but they play a key role and factor in your success over time in this one life we have to live. So if you're thinking of, things that are helping you get where you want to go, using the story of, okay, hey, having a good relationship to buy my first home in a time that wasn't a great time to try and buy a home, started from a relationship from 15 years ago. When purchasing the home, it allowed us to really move forward in a sense of being able to be first-time homeowners in a time where you're like, hey, if I didn't ask the question or go seek out relationships that had already been established to understand if there were someone who's going to be buying or selling their home, then the opportunity wouldn't be there. So I bring the story up too to remind you that as you're going through life, be sure to constantly ask yourself, what do you want? What can you get out of the life you're living? And why are you after what you want? And mind you, the balance of what you're after may be, hey, I've always wanted to own a home, or hey, I've always wanted to travel. I've always wanted to live in this state or this city or this location, whatever. I've always wanted to drive this kind of car, whatever it may be, or start this kind of business, get into real estate, whatever it may be. I think it's super important for people to balance out what they want and how they desire it. And then, one of the other topics I wanted to talk about that we'll be talking about is open reflection, challenging what you're hearing. And it's not challenging it in a negative way, right? You don't just hop on everybody and be like, I don't like what you're saying to me. You want to ask yourself, and I'm going to be asking viewers, and I'm going to be next episode if I get any feedback from anyone's thoughts. But I want you all to think of a time you had a conversation that changed you. And I'm going to be sharing those stories over time throughout the episodes of the last time a conversation changed you, but what was the change that you saw in yourself that you either was positive or negative, right? Mind you, we've all been in a place where we've been in places where we've had some negative change and some positive, but talking about them and being real about them is what Deep Dive is for. What would happen if you let someone in just 10% more? Meaning like, if you go to the same Chinese food restaurant and you see the same lady like I do at China King, it's not that she's trying to come over to my house and hang out with me and be friends. It's more of, hey, I can let her in 10% more and ask her how she's doing, if she's having a good day, how just something small talk, and that's normally what the 10%. So definitely want to hear from you guys about that. But my challenge to everybody moving forward, and if you are listening and watching, is to always go in to each week and each month and challenge yourself to have a deeper conversation. And deeper conversation shouldn't be scary or uncomfortable. It should be something that you can relay from a message from your heart. So that's what I would want to leave everybody with as you're starting to think about what you want to do. And then, I'm going to be building a community of people who are interested in giving me feedback of topics that they want to hear talked about, whether it's, financial literacy, bringing people on to understand how business works, but how relationships work, bringing in actual therapists to talk about cognitive behavioral therapy that'll allow us to understand what is it that we as humans think and feel like that can drive some of our action of where we want to go and how we get there. And when you all are thinking of things you want to hear from the podcast, I'm very open, as this is the first episode, and the first episode is really just meant to get a grasp on why and what we're doing this for. As I mentioned, Deep Dive is, again, just one of those topics where we want to open the floor and kind of have an open table, instead of making it agenda focused, but really just making it open about what's happening, what's changing, how do you make those changes, and what are actionable things you can do to create change in your life. And that balance always starts from how and what you're doing and where you're spending your time. So those are the different topics. And the other thing I want to challenge you to do is say, hey, for the first 15-20 minutes of the 5 days, Monday through Friday. Where am I spending my first 15 minutes as I start my day, right? Whether it's driving in your car to work or once you're at work, where are you spending your first 15 or after you get off work, right? Just think of a time where am I spending 15 minutes and be cognizant of what that 15 minutes felt like. And the reason I bring that up is as you use a 15-minute increment of time, if you do that 4 times, 3 times, that's 45, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, right? The balance of knowing how much something makes you feel in that time also goes into going back into that emotional side that we're going to be talking about where, am I self-aware? Am I relationships that I'm dealing with in that 15 minutes? Was I pushy? Was I rushing them? Was I, not growing? And then even in business, on the business side, did I make sure to listen to what the business partner was describing and needed to happen first before answering on how I could maybe change or affect the outcome that they described? Being a good business partner also comes to understanding the needs of the business, right? The needs of the business come from the partner who might be in charge of the task or the project. So really using that emotional intelligence and that reflection time is super important. And as we think about, the podcast too, I'm going to be having guests on describing things that you all want to hear and really just making this more of a community vibe around what's important when you have deeper conversations and why deeper conversations are super powerful. And when I'm thinking of deeper conversations and how powerful they can be, a lot of them come from and start with where you want to go, and that balance of where you want to go and what the outcome isn't an age thing. It's really not a color thing. Of course, there's things that can affect and change what you can and cannot get out of life due to your race or religion or certain things you aren't always in control over. But your actions of what you want out of life are the true things that can get you what you want and what you desire. So when you're thinking about the deep dive conversations, I'm excited. I'm actually really looking forward to hearing what you all think and what you all want to talk about when we think about deep dive conversations. And mind you, these are going to be conversations that are going to make some people uncomfortable just because, everybody's not going to agree with how you feel or what you feel about things. So that part of understanding helping people grow is going to be super important to what's described in deep dive. And then that balance of reflection, and that balance of, why conversations stay surface level, and then what deep really means is what I'm really looking forward to. But I'm excited to bring on business partners, bring in some people who just know what is happening around them, and the things that are happening in their specific, whether it's their career, whether it's their role in life, and just really understanding, okay, what brought you to those points? What were some actionable things that led you to make these decisions? And how do you get there? That's really what I want Deep Dive to be for the community, is a place where people have blueprints of how to do things, whether you want to start a plumbing business, whether you want to start a software SaaS business, whether you want to get into real estate or buy a turnkey business. You can get on Biz Buy Sell and buy a turnkey business, and a lot of people aren't aware of that boomers are going to be selling their businesses in the next 10 years, and in that time frame you're going to be able to make a lot of money if you're looking to buy a turnkey business in the future. Now, there's no promises or guarantee to make a lot of money. What I'm saying is without the hard work and consistency and determination, those are some of the things you can look forward to, but you need those 3 things to add in. So we're going to be talking about those 3 things, which I'm excited for, and then just be discussing like what it took for some individuals to get there. Are you joining professional networks? Are you going to your local church? Are you joining things that are happening in your community that can kind of get you involved with more of the people up to the places that you want to be in or places you want to go? Or whether it's in your career, are you asking the questions of your boss that are going to get you that promotion? Like, what am I doing or what can I do to get promoted? What can I do next to move the things in my life that I want to see forward? And balancing that out comes from asking the question. But you got to know yourself deeply to know how to ask deep questions. And I think that's where Deep Dive is going to play a significant role in how it's going to help people understand what we're doing and why. And the balance of what we're doing and why starts with, okay, hey, who are we talking to and why are we talking to them? So I'm going to pull up some of the main topics that we're going to be talking about. And as I mentioned before, this is my first episode. So this is kind of exciting for me to think about our episodes. We're going to be shooting 2 episodes a month, but also at the same time, we're making sure the deep dive conversations are being listened to and digested in the right manner. Some ones that I'm really excited about is why am I still stuck? And how to break out of my career confusion in 2025. Whether you are in school, go out of school, went to school, have an MBA, whatever it may be, how do you pivot or pair what you want out of life without sacrificing, your career or things you would like to keep, in your life? Is there a relationship? Is this relationship helping me grow? And this is personally and professionally. How do you navigate a personal and professional relationship if it's not helping you grow and change? And because you don't want to not change or not grow, so that balance of not having the chance to grow or change can really affect the overall outcome of what you get. And then, buying a home while drowning in student debt. First time homeowner, step one, no one teaches you. I think of buying a home and it's like, man, no one taught me all of this. And it's not a bad thing. It's like, my mom never owned a home. So how can someone who's never owned a home teach me things that she's never done? And then, quitting your 9 to 5, is that smart or stupid to build your own business in 2025? I would tell anybody, follow your heart and your dreams. If you have the capability and the determination and consistency, you can build anything you want. You don't have to stay in any 9 to 5. Whenever it comes to artificial intelligence and an AI, we're going to see a huge grasp in technology growth. And you can use flippa.com as an example of where you can go in, and what you'll start to see is people are going to be leaving their 9 to 5s because they can go buy an online website business off of Flippa, or they can go buy a turnkey business that's already existing and making money off of Biz Buy Sell and leveraging AI on how to run that business. So we're going to be talking about that because I think as myself and other people are thinking of different businesses that they want to purchase or businesses that they would like to have in the future, grow. And then one of the other topics that we're going to be talking about is, burnout from breakthrough, how you rewire your routine to clarify growth. I remember I did the 75 hard challenge, and I can tell you, after doing the 75 day challenge, I was like, wow, I saw a change in myself, not only mentally, but the amount of food intake that I was willing to sit and eat was less sugar and eating more whole foods. And it really just made me feel so much better. And when I'm thinking of the balance of what I'd like to see, I was like, wow, is this going to burn me out? So I wouldn't recommend doing 75 hard all the time and consistently, but I would recommend doing it once a year just to get yourself healthy and back into a place of a good mental, physical, and spiritual state. And then, number 6, can I change my life this year? Step-by-step guide to reinvention. I need to stop doing this or stop doing this altogether. No, you just need to stop doing certain things over time altogether, and that will help you get what you want. I'm sure that a lot of you have read it or heard about it, but Atomic Habits is a great book. If you haven't got it, check it out. And then one of our topics is going to be dating while healing, how to build a healthy connection after trauma. So, there's a lot of traumatic experiences that people go through individually, and it's very hard and difficult to navigate trauma. And trauma comes in different ways. It comes in the physical form, it comes in the mental form, and it can also come in both ways, right? And it come in other ways that I may not be aware of or have not mentioned. But when you think of the trauma that comes with certain things, and you're trying to build relationships and have a deeper relationship, whether it's with your partner, whether it's with a professional, or whether it's just with a friend, sometimes understanding that trauma of what makes that person tick is really helpful for you to know how to navigate relationships and conversations with them. So, that's where I think understanding how someone's healing and understanding how to continue to build on that. And then, this is also going to be one of our topics is AI, war, and we want to hear you all's opinions about the elections and how these things make you feel. Everything's changing so drastically and rapidly. There's a lot of ambiguity around any color or any race really trying to uplift themselves. But, the good thing about being in America and then being American is it truly is a capital country where you can really become anything you want, no matter what color you are. And in a lot of places that can be a little difficult to do. So that's something where I want to hear from the viewers. Again, that's a deep dive conversation where it's not going to make people feel comfortable, but it's definitely something that I want to hear about, a topic about how you guys are feeling, because I think talking about it is one of the main issues that's not happening. That's the balance of some of these conversations, is some people are misunderstood and then some certain things aren't understood at all. So it's not always our fault as individuals of why. School's not for me, but I still want to win. What's the alternative to a non-traditional education? It's going to trade school is a huge opportunity. If you go to trade school, it's going to be a huge opportunity for you to uplift yourself, move yourself in the right direction. Okay, hey, if school's not for me and I get a trade and I have a chance to buy a reoccurring open business that's turnkey, that's doing revenue, that'll allow me to go to a welding school, buy a welding company, go to plumbing school, buy a plumbing company, go to electrician school, buy an electric company. We're going to be talking about things that sometimes make you think about what you should want and what you can have, and I say that to say living in a small town and growing up in a small town. So the balance of knowing, okay, just because I'm not in a big place doesn't mean that I can't do big things. The next episode is number 2 is going to be, why am I still stuck and how do I break out of my career confusion in 2025? So, that's where we're going to be talking about, for listeners questioning their path at school or work, dive into, signing in to outgrowing your current path. We're going to talk about some tools that you can go use. We're going to talk about AI tools that you can use that can really help you change and break that career confusion now, to help you leverage things at a quicker rate to get you where you want to go. In having relationships with recruiters, we're going to be talking about those different things. So again, this was my first podcast. This won't be my last podcast, but deep dive. Looking forward to having many more conversations. Looking forward to growing our subscribers. So please please like, and please subscribe. And again, we appreciate your time and the effort to want to grow, to change, take a deeper dive on yourself. The challenge this week is to challenge yourself to have deeper conversations. And that's the challenge I leave you with every time, is to just go in and be open-minded with the open heart, and work hard to make sure people understand who you are and understand where that line in the sand is from the conversation you had. And that's why deep conversations are important.